Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our webcast, Part of the Team, the Role of Advocates in Anti-Violence Work. My name is Ellen Gormican, and I am a PAVE educator for Cornerstone Advocacy Service in Bloomington, Minnesota. Cornerstone is a domestic violence organization that services approximately 60% of Hennepin County. PAVE stands for Preventing Abuse and Violence Through Education and is part of Cornerstone's school-based services. This program provides advocacy for middle and high school students who are dealing with a variety of issues, including violence at home, anger, bullying and harassment, dating violence, and sexual violence. In addition, I serve as a volunteer with the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, as well as the Sexual Violence Center in Minneapolis.
And I am Michelle Fournier with the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, a program of Gunderson National Child Protection Training Center. Our mission is to end all forms of child abuse, neglect, and exploitation through training, education, advocacy, prevention, and awareness, providing care and treatment for children, families, and adult survivors. The reason we are doing this webcast is that with our ever increasingly violent and changing society, the need for survivors to have information, support, and advocacy when moving forward in their healing journey is crucial. When a person's life has been interrupted and impacted by violence, the system and all of the choices can be really overwhelming. Fortunately, there are a lot of services and structures in place that can be of help to a survivor, but unfortunately, the sheer amount of choices can be a barrier in and of itself. Additionally, there are many well-meaning professionals out there that want to help survivors, but because they have not had the proper training and don't understand the dynamics of power and control or the factors contributing to a person being victimized, these well-intentioned people can also be re-victimizing. This is especially true of white professionals working within and for marginalized communities. We hope that this webcast will help you better understand the role of the victim advocate in the anti-violence movement from the micro to macro level, and that you will be able to identify the unique role advocates play in the multidisciplinary team when working with survivors of violence. And we hope to provide you with some ideas for a holistic perspective when providing support and advocacy to survivors.
We're going to start today's discussion with an anonymous poem describing the role of an advocate in working with clients. We are here to listen, not to work miracles. We are here to help people discover what they are feeling, not to make the feelings go away. We are here to help people identify their options, not to decide what they should do. We are here to discuss steps with people, not to take steps for them. We are here to help someone discover their own strengths, not to rescue them and leave them vulnerable. We are here to help someone discover they can help themselves, not to take responsibility for them. We are here to help people learn how to choose, not to keep them from making difficult choices. We are here to provide support for positive change. So, where are advocates? Advocates can be found in all types of client services, from legal and medical to schools and government agencies. Not only are advocates working in a multitude of arenas, they also frequently serve as the connection between various agencies on behalf of their clients. For example, I work primarily within the school setting, requiring that I understand and respect the role of school administration. However, individual client needs may dictate that I connect with child protection, youth homeless services, local food banks, sexual assault services, mental health professionals, and others. Although I am not expected to be an expert in all of these services, it is necessary that I am aware of what resources are available and how to establish a connection, and the limits of what other agencies can provide my client. Barton Erickson, coordinator of the PAVE program, described his advocacy in schools as creating a safe, trusting place for youth to express their feelings, talk throughout their life circumstances, and help strategize for their future success. He identifies the greatest success of the PAVE program as finding ways to advocate for youth while operating as guests within the parameters of a much larger school system. As a sexual assault advocate, I connect with clients at the hospital when they choose to have a sexual assault exam. In this role, my sole purpose is to serve the client, in spite of the needs of other agencies present. For instance, a sexual assault response service nurse will collect forensic evidence and give the client medical information. Law enforcement may be involved along with other hospital staff and/or friends or family members. Sometimes the needs of those present can compete with each other. As an advocate, I am concerned with my client and therefore might also interact with housing resources, mental health services, and legal services, among others. I need to have knowledge of specific issues that I might come into contact with, such as sex trafficking, legal rights, crime victim rights, orders for protection, and child protection. The better an advocate can navigate multiple systems and the more knowledge they have, the better they are able to serve their clients. Not only do advocates need to work within multiple systems, but also they must work within diverse communities. When I receive a referral for a new client at a school, I need to be comfortable and prepared to work with someone from any cultural or ethnic background, gender identification or sexual orientation, religious group, socioeconomic group, etc. Of course, I can never be an expert on a community of which I am not a member, and therefore it's important that I am aware of other agencies that might specialize in working with specific populations if I feel I cannot comprehensively advocate for my client. Some of these agencies include the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, the Brian Coyle Center, Casa de Esperanza, Asian Women United, and many others.
Another example comes from an advocate who works in the criminal justice system, who said that being an advocate to him means supporting a victim as they move through the legal system to a place of safety. I want victims to know that someone understands that they are a survivor of various levels of violence, regardless of what the legal system may determine or decide as an outcome. Advocates working on a macro level provide education and training to service providers, legislators, and lawmakers to help determine policies and laws that support individuals who have been victimized or for various levels of prevention. We will talk more about the macro level advocacy later. When we think about who advocates serve, we really should think about who they don't serve, because really advocates serve just about anyone, including primary and secondary victims and survivors, neighborhoods, classrooms, communities, support groups, and entire populations. Advocates are usually bound by the intention and direction of their agency for which they work, and may only offer services and support to folks who fall in a certain demographic, such as survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, or they may have a specific job, such as assisting survivors in obtaining orders for protection. Advocates may be assigned in culturally specific service agencies which target a specific population and therefore need to have restrictions on who they can and can't serve. Although there are services for abusers and offenders, some victim survivor service providers may need to screen out people who seek services because they are not a victim, and there are better fits for servicing them. Advocates can work with someone or a group just once, for example, when a resource or referral is made, or when a training or education is provided one time. Or they can be long-term advocacy. They can provide long-term advocacy, such as when someone is victimized or an advocate sees them through the entire process, or when an advocate provides an ongoing training and education to a group of people on a regular basis, such as with Cornerstone in their PAVE program.
Advocates will inevitably encounter issues of mandated reporting in their work. This can be a tricky issue for multiple reasons. For one, an advocate's employer may have different policies around mandated reporting than the other agencies also working with the client. For example, school officials have different requirements for making a report than I do as an employee of Cornerstone. Also, even if an official report does not need to be made, some agency employees must report certain information to other parties, such as parents or teachers. School guidance counselors are expected to share information about students to parents and teachers, whereas when I work with a student, I make sure to inform them that what we discuss is completely confidential, unless 1, a student talks of suicide, 2, a student relays a new instance of abuse which puts them in immediate danger, and 3, a student confesses specific plans to use violence towards another student. The level of confidentiality between myself and a youth client is, I believe, one of the reasons they often feel more comfortable talking freely. When working as a sexual assault advocate, either on the crisis line or in the hospital, a client must disclose specific information, such as the date of the attack and the perpetrator, in order for me to move forward with a mandated report. Another reason it is important to know your agency's specific policies around mandated reporting is that making a report has the potential to put a client at greater risk. For example, if a youth is being victimized by someone living at home and Child Protection comes to do an investigation, the perpetrator will know that the client has disclosed the abuse. If the client is not immediately removed from the home, they might suffer increased abuse as punishment. Therefore, if an advocate feels a report is necessary and their client is fearful of the consequences, it is important to have as much information as possible in order to submit a thorough report to the appropriate agency. The more ambiguous the report, the less likely any concrete actions will result. Advocates must also be aware that in order to share information with other agency officials, the client must provide written consent. There are sometimes instances in which an advocate may need or want to share client information with, for example, a client's mental health case manager or lawyer. In such cases, the client must sign a release of information form stating that they are giving permission for such information to be shared. As advocates, we are always concerned with what is best for our clients. Therefore, it is essential to be fully aware of the mandated reporting laws determined by the state you live in, the agency you work for, and the other agencies you are working with.
Part of being an effective advocate is knowing within your agency what you can and cannot do. A good advocate knows and understands their own boundaries and how to communicate that to a client. For example, at the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, we get all sorts of requests from people to help. Oftentimes we get requests from sex offenders to advocate for changes in sex offender laws because of Jacob's Law, which implemented the National Sex Offender Registry. While we care about all people and understand that Jacob's Law is not perfect, it is not within the scope of our services to work with offenders in this capacity and or to advocate for legislative changes to laws protecting sex offenders since we are a victim-serving agency. However, we would still respond to the individual's request for help, but it would be with a referral to a better fitting agency rather than an offer of ongoing support. Most advocates have a large caseload and they need to be aware of their capacity. Therefore, knowing the boundaries and limitations on the services they provide contributes to an advocate's overall effectiveness and functioning. So what is advocacy? Advocacy cannot be defined simply, but it can be interchanged with the word support. Advocacy is supporting someone or something. Some of the theories or guiding principles of advocacy that can help you understand an advocate's perspective include empowerment theory, strengths-based perspective, feminist theory, social justice theory, relational theory, a trauma-informed approach, and crisis de-escalation skills. This list is by no means exclusive, but if you want to be the best advocate you can be, understanding these theories and concepts is crucial in order to offer best practices and not re-victimize someone who has been victimized. For example, empowerment theory is a process by which people as well as groups attain power, access to various resources, and have control over their own lives. Empowerment helps individuals gain the ability to attain their maximum personal and collective goals and aspirations. As an advocate, if we do everything for the person or community we are serving, we will not be providing them with the tools to restore their power, and we will be doing them a disservice. We need to understand the concepts within empowerment theory so we know how to not take over and do everything, but instead take a step back, be patient, and be witness to the process, only intervening if necessary, and being a facilitator or guide, not a director. Advocates need to be very intentional in their work. There is a fine line, and all of your thoughts, language, and actions matter.
By this point in the webcast, hopefully you have some ideas of the nature of advocacy. Now Michelle and I will go into specifics about what exactly advocates do for their clients. One key component of advocacy is having knowledge of and access to lots of information. As we've discussed, advocates are constantly interacting with other agencies and services. It is pivotal that an advocate feels competent in helping their client navigate a multitude of systems. It is not that a client is not capable of accessing this information on their own, but often an advocate is working with a client as they are experiencing a crisis or feeling particularly overwhelmed. An advocate provides information and knowledge so that a client is able to focus on their personal healing. As I've mentioned, advocates work with incredibly diverse clients whose needs differ. So they need to be able to anticipate what barriers their clients may face in accessing services, as well as what information is most pertinent and what situations may actually trigger an emotional crisis. For example, when working with LGBTQ populations, an advocate must be aware of what agencies have staff that are trained in working with LGBTQ identifying clients. Clients that are experiencing financial difficulties, or that are undocumented, or that do not have health insurance, all may face different barriers while seeking services. And advocates must consider these circumstances when giving a client service referrals. Finally, in order for an advocate to remain client-centered, they must remember the importance of providing their clients with choices. Victim survivors may feel overwhelmed, but they alone know what options would work best for them. So an advocate's responsibility is to provide those options without judgment.
As previously stated, the word advocacy is synonymous with support. Support can be as simple as answering the phone and providing that connection for someone who is feeling alone. Support is about listening, allowing a space for someone to let it all out and be heard without judgment or criticism. Support is about a person being believed, validated, and understood in their own process, reiterating the importance of connection with a client. Advocacy comes in the form of accompaniment so that the person has support when they decide to report to law enforcement, go to the hospital to get a rape kit done, or when they have to go through the criminal justice process. Advocacy is about restoring the power that was taken from a victim survivor by offering choices, letting the client identify their needs, and choosing the right path to healing by helping the client realize that no one knows them better than they know themselves. For example, if a client asks, "What should I do?" which is all too common, we as advocates can offer them support by laying out their choices, helping them see the small steps and not letting them get overwhelmed by the big picture. We can remind them to trust their gut and tap into their knowing of what is best for them. This is how they can take their power back and learn to trust themselves.
Clients that we work with have all experienced some kind of trauma, yet they remain individuals who will process, cope, heal, and communicate in different ways. As an advocate, it is our job to help each client to navigate their individual healing process and discover what coping mechanisms work best for them when they feel triggered. I've worked with some clients that use art, some that write in journals, and others that listen to music in order to cope with their trauma. A client's coping mechanisms are not always entirely healthy. Some may use drugs or alcohol or self-injury. Advocates are not there to judge a client, only to help them discover coping skills with fewer negative consequences when that client is ready to make a change. If a client is using alcohol to cope with a sexual assault, it's probably because it works. Drinking does temporarily make the pain go away for a while. My role is to help the client discover how alcohol might negatively impact other parts of their life and to support them in rediscovering their personal value. Advocacy should focus not just on specific client behaviors, but also how trauma affects the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Victim survivors often report feelings of isolation, guilt, and shame. Often the most powerful thing you can tell a client is that what they have experienced is not their fault. Victim survivors frequently relive their trauma and wonder what they could have done differently or how they could have avoided their victimization. Advocates must be the voice, and sometimes are the only one, reminding the victim survivor that they are not to blame.
So all systems are interconnected. Even though your work may be primarily with an individual, advocates will likely be working on every level of the ecological model if they are providing truly effective advocacy. Perhaps you work on the micro level and your coworker works on the meso level, and then another coworker works on the macro level. However it is set up at your agency, it is important to understand the various levels and the importance of working at all levels in order to provide the best services for individuals and communities.
The microsystem is the layer of the ecological model that is closest to the individual and is those structures that individuals interact with directly. This includes the daily or temporary exchanges between an individual and their school, their family members, neighborhood, and others. These interactions shape how the individual views their environment. For example, if they feel safe in their neighborhood, they may be more likely to feel safe navigating other unknown spaces. Or if a child grows up interacting with the abusive relationship of their parents, they may be more likely to see abuse as a normal part of dating or marriage. The individual learns to build trust, communicate, create relationships, and express themselves within their microsystems. It is their reference point for the world. When working with a client, it is important for advocates to have an understanding of their client's microsystems and how they might affect their healing process. The central part of an advocate's job is to respond to an individual's victimization. A person is victimized when they experience trauma, and their personal feelings of power and control are damaged or destroyed. An advocate must understand how the individual interacts with their immediate environments so that they can help their client restore the power and control that has been taken from them.
The meso level of advocacy is working with systems professionals and providing them with education and training in order for them to better serve the individual clients you may be working with. For example, you may train school staff on how to work and best serve LGBTQ youth because you work for an agency that serves LGBTQ people that are survivors of violence. Therefore, by working at the meso level, you are in turn directly impacting the lives of the individuals you serve.
The macro system includes the cultural values, customs, laws, and ideologies that inform the greater social context in which the individual lives. The macro system can put clients at an advantage or disadvantage. For instance, children that grow up in a state that values early childhood nutrition and wellness, or that attend schools that provide lunches to low-income students, create an environment where children are valued and are more healthy, both mentally and physically. Clients can have difficulty accessing macro systems, such as healthcare services, and this can negatively affect their healing process. Also, although improvements have been made, LGBTQ clients can have particular difficulty not only accessing services that address their specific needs, but also face the daily stresses of living in a society that might not support their gender or sexual identity.
Now we want to focus on what we feel are the most important characteristics of advocacy. Number one, we feel it is essential for you to have your own training, not only the 40-hour sexual assault advocacy training, but more training specific to working with folks who have been victimized, traumatized, and in working with marginalized communities. Seek out trainings, ask questions, and be open to learning from the people you serve, as well as from your coworkers and colleagues. Number two is to take the time to build rapport. Being an effective advocate takes patience. We need to meet the individuals and communities we serve where they are at and not tell them what to do, but rather be by their side as they decide to move forward in their process. This is individualized and requires you to bring your full self to the work. Remember, it takes time to build trust, and change does not happen overnight. Number three is to listen, to really, really listen. People seek out advocates because they need extra support. Although your voice is important, what is more important is that the individuals and communities you are serving have an opportunity to be heard. Effective advocates don't have to say much. It is in what you say that matters. Using validating statements such as, "I hear what you're saying, that's understandable, and thank you for sharing." And be careful not to use any sort of shaming or blaming language, such as with the use of the word "why."
Number four is intentionality. As an advocate, you need to be aware at all times of how you might be coming across to your client. Everything you do will be interpreted. This is not because clients are inherently judgmental, but rather because they are likely feeling particularly vulnerable and uneasy, at least until you build a relationship with them. So when someone is in an unknown environment and they've experienced trauma, that person will understandably be more aware of the nuances of an advocate's behavior. Therefore, advocates must make sure to be conscious of their body language, verbal responses like sighing or yawning, and their eye contact. It is not hard to tell if someone is listening intently or if their mind is somewhere else. Number 5, choices. So as we've discussed, victimization is when power and control are taken from the individual. One way of helping to restore that power is to give the client choices and trusting that the client knows whether something will work for them or not. I have had clients that have said that professional therapy or group therapy or taking legal action against a perpetrator is not something that they would find helpful. As an advocate, I accept this, and I trust that they know themselves best. I am not their parent and am not there to make the client try something in case it actually does work. Often, a client does not necessarily know what will work, so it's my job to brainstorm all the possibilities with them and discuss the potential positive and negative consequences of both. Sometimes I help a client reflect on choices they made in the past to inform what they could choose to do now. Choices are so important in the process of showing a client that they can make good decisions, they do know what is best for them, and they can feel proud for their ability to do both. And finally, self-care. Both the client and the advocate need to nurture themselves. The client is navigating their healing process and possibly still living in an abusive environment. They may feel incredibly stressed and exhausted and doubt their own ability to move forward. Advocates can help victim survivors focus on being kind to themselves by taking specific time to refuel both physically and mentally. Also, advocates absolutely must be aware of their own mental health and must take care to avoid compassion fatigue and secondary trauma.
And that concludes our webcast. We welcome you to tune into more trainings from the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center and the National Child Protection Training Center. To learn more, please visit our website at www.ncptc.org. We want to especially tune you into our annual prevention conference that will be held this year at the Mall of America in Minneapolis on July 21st through the 23rd.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us for this webcast. Michelle and I hope that you learned something new about being an advocate and have new insight into how advocacy might play a role in the agency you work for. Please feel free to contact us if you would like additional information or have questions. Thank you.
Thank you.